In this lesson, we'll learn about a process that will help to guide us as we work on really any project as a graphic designer. Alright, so depending on the project you're working on, it's never going to start out right here with what we see on my screen. This is going to be an end result. Now, obviously, you don't just sit down and build this out of your head. There has to be some steps that lead up to really building the final result of the project. Now, I'm here to tell you that there is a process that you can follow that'll really help to sort of streamline this process, keep you focused on the goal without kind of streaming off on little rabbit trails, so to speak. So now, no matter what type of project you're working on, you can apply this process to that project. So let's just say a client approaches you. Maybe it's this Griffin and Associates, and they say, I need you to do a project for me. I need whatever that project is. Could be a logo, could be an illustration, could be a motion graphics piece. What's the first step that you need to take as a graphic designer? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to sit down and you need to identify and define the problem that exists. If you don't know what that problem is, how do you ever think you're going to solve that problem? So we need to define that, and I would write that down, put it in some kind of a digital format, write it down on a piece of paper, whatever you feel comfortable with. But define that problem so that halfway through the project, the problem hasn't evolved into something different. You have a concrete problem that you can always refer back to. You also want to go ahead and establish some objectives for the project. In a perfect world, what would that outcome look like? What objectives does the outcome need to meet? Go ahead and identify both of these two elements, write them down, and then we'll move on to that next step. So the next step here, if we go ahead and switch in my little slideshow, you're going to see here that it says do the research. And this is kind of a broad step. This is going to change depending on your client. But the things you want to research, obviously you want to research your client. You want to figure out what business they're in. Figure out what their values and the ideas that are central or core to their business are. If someone were to approach me and say, hi, I'm with XYZ Consulting, and I need you to do a project for me. I don't know what XYZ Consulting is, so I'm going to want to sit down and really research the company, figure out what it is they're all about. Now, one way that you can do this is through what's called a client, or rather a creative brief. And I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of a creative brief here. This is actually from one of our other courses. It's, again, for that Griffin and Associates. So if I were to pull this up here, you'll find this in your referenced files folder inside your project files. If you want to go ahead and just kind of read through this. So I've got a lot of different questions in here that are structured to get me better acquainted with my client. So you can see things like define the problem, what is the key message they want to communicate to the viewer, getting to know their business. There's several different sections in here that you can kind of read through if you have the time, if you'd like to, but explore this document and see what are some of the questions that I might ask to better get to know my client, their business, and even their competition. So those are things you want to research. Another important thing to research is the other half of this equation. You have this client that's brought you in to do a project for them, but who is their audience? Who are they wanting to speak to? So do the research on the audience as well. Who's the target market? Figure out what their likes and dislikes are, and what communicates to that audience. So once you've researched all these things and you're ready to move on, the next step is to develop your ideas by brainstorming. Now, again, in this process, this bucket is very broad. There's lots of different ways to brainstorm. Now, let me just go ahead and show you a couple of those here. One of those ways is to create what's known as an associated word list. So you can see here with this associated word list, I've come through and just written down very descriptive words that describe sort of kind of the feel that I wanted this identity for Griffin and Associates to have. So you can kind of browse this document and see that I've highlighted some of these words that really stuck out to me, things that I wanted this identity to communicate. So this is an associated word list. Now, obviously, there's one component to brainstorming that's very important, and if you're not fully comfortable with sketching, don't feel bad. Not all designers are illustrators. That's not something that everybody has a gift for, but being able to sketch and explore ideas, whether it is on a pencil or with a pencil and paper, or whether it's inside an application like Photoshop, being able to just do little doodles and sketches, let me just zoom in here on some of these so you can see these, to explore ideas is a critical part of being a designer. And again, depending on what type of project you're working on, this is a step, sketching, that really is relevant to any type of project that you're working on in graphic design. Again, whether it's motion graphics, whether it's a billboard design, whether it's a page layout, sketching is a quick way for you to get ideas out of your head and down into some kind of a concrete form. So you can see I've got lots of different ideas here that I was sketching around with for Griffin and Associates. Now, if you look at these sketches, you'll see a number of different ideas sort of beginning to evolve. Here, I'm playing with more of a literal idea of a griffin. Over here, I'm starting to play with kind of a puzzle piece idea, which you can see here evolved into the final logo. There's other ideas at work here as well. You can see sort of like the old style courthouse with the columns, a stylized version of that, as well as sort of some decorative old world style typefaces or initials, almost a monogram style of letter form being drawn as well. So lots of different ideas here, lots of different possible directions, but essentially what I'm doing here is I'm exploring different possible concepts for this identity. Ultimately, the goal of this brainstorming step is to develop several possible conceptual directions that you can go for that project. So if you're not familiar with the term concept as it relates to graphic design, the best explanation I can give you for the word concept is simply relates to maybe a costume party that you're going to. If you're going to a costume party and it has a theme, then that theme would be the concept. Just as in graphic design, with a concept, everything should fit together with that concept. If you're going to a costume party that has a maybe a robot theme, you don't want to go dressed as a zombie. You want to go dressed as a robot. Just like with graphic design, if everything doesn't fit the concept, then the design is going to be less effective. So I could get off on a tangent with the idea of a concept, so let's go ahead and move on. So let's say we've developed some concepts in this process, in this brainstorming step, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Well, what exactly is that next step? Well, the next step is to analyze the ideas based on the project objectives. So we've got all these different conceptual directions that we could possibly go with our project. One of them is going to be better than the others. And one of them is going to be more effective for this particular project than the others. And what better way to determine that than to examine those objectives that we wrote earlier on in this course. That's why writing these objectives is, and being as specific as possible, is pretty important. So ultimately at this step, when you're analyzing your ideas based on the project objectives, you'll want to settle on one of these concepts that you've been playing around with in the brainstorming step. And once you've settled on that, you can write what's known as a concept statement. Now, you're probably at this point wondering, well, what exactly is a concept statement? A concept statement's fairly easy. Once you have determined what your concept is, it's just simply one or two lines of text that summarize your concept in relation to this project. It's going to keep you focused. Much like stating the problem keeps you focused earlier on, as you're beginning to build out your final outcome, having a concept statement is going to keep you focused as we kind of finish out the project. So after you've written that concept statement, there's really only one step left in this process. You can come over here and you can implement the best idea. This is where you build this idea out. If it's something that requires a scalable vector outcome, then you would probably move to a program like Adobe Illustrator. If it's a digital illustration or an illustration of some form and you're implementing it digitally, then maybe you move to an application like Photoshop. But the last step in this process is implementation of the best idea. And at the end, once you're done implementing that idea, you'll end up with the final outcome of whatever that project is that you're working on. So this is a very simple process. There's not that many steps to it, just 5. But as you can see here, this is a process that is adaptable to really any type of project you're working on. Again, feel free to check out that referenced files folder in your project files. I've included several files that are related to this Griffin and Associates logo that you see here in front of us. So in this lesson, we've learned about a process that is adaptable to virtually any project that we may work on. Go ahead and give it a try. I think you'll find it's successful.